the life and tragic death of Phil and Bryn Hartman.
He was just one of those guys who could do anything and everything.
He said, "Well, Norm, it looks like the wife's taking me to divorce court."
She resented him because he was in the limelight and she wasn't.
She was just the greatest mother. Phil issued an ultimatum. He couldn't put up with her drug taking anymore.
Finally, the mask fell off.
All tonight on TV Guide, the truth behind the rumors. The story behind the tragic death of Phil and Bryn Hartman.
He basically said, if you don't stop using, we're finished, and I guess she couldn't stop.
All when TV Guide, the truth behind the rumors, continues. The real cause of the Phil and Bryn Hartman murder-suicide.
The alcohol and the cocaine and the Zoloft in her system, and then coming home and having an argument, I just think she just snapped.
All when TV Guide, the truth behind the rumors, continues.
He was, consummately skilled in impressions.
Hey-o!
And voices.
This is wild.
He was just one of those guys who could do anything and everything.
Join me, Sinead O'Connor, and the entire Sinead O'Connor family.
And he could play authority figures brilliantly.
I did in hell. In my dorm room in Oxford University, I had a bong the size of a grain salad.
He had a great facade, and I think that's why people were surprised. His ability to be somebody else, the character to impersonate a president, was a great ability for him to hide, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, the day that he was murdered was the day that finally the mask fell off, and people said, oh, what was happening in this guy's life?
Yeah, hi. There's been a shooting at 5065 Encino Boulevard.
This time it appears to be a murder-suicide.
He was the father that I never really had.
Mrs. Hartman died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
She was just the greatest mother.
She apparently shot herself as the officers were in the house removing the second child.
They had a great relationship.
Phil issued an ultimatum. He couldn't put up with her drug taking anymore.
The illusion that the marriage was well balanced was carefully maintained.
Mr. Hartman had been dead for a while.
Had our victim not been Phil Hartman, nobody would care about this case.
Coming up, Bryn Hartman's insecurities begin to multiply.
Oh, she had her chin done, and she had her nose work done. I think she had her eyes done.
And Phil struggles to keep his marriage together.
He always gave her ultimatums and got her into rehab. He did everything he could.
When TV Guide, the truth behind the rumors, continues. Phil Hartman was voted class clown of his high school. But his performing career didn't really begin till he became a member of an improv theater group in L.A., the Groundlings. In the early 80s, his marriage to artist Lisa Strain lasted just 2 years.
Oh, the wedding song. It's so wonderful to have a strawberry blonde around the house.
But in that time, he collaborated with fellow groundling Paul Rubens by writing and performing in Pee-wee's Playhouse. In 1986, what would prove to be the two most important events in his life occurred. First, John Lovitz, Saturday Night Live member and former groundling, recommended Phil to SNL's producer Lorne Michaels. That same year, Phil had a blind date with the woman that would change and eventually end his life, Bryn Omdahl. Bryn had moved to L.A. from Minnesota to pursue a career as an actress and model, but soon she found herself on the dark side of life in Hollywood.
Back in Brendan's younger days, she experimented with a lot of drugs. She was freebasing there for a while, and at that point, she didn't have an apartment to live in. She had nowhere to call home. I mean, she literally was a street person.
Bryn managed to turn her life around through rehab.
Well, by the time Phil came into the picture, Brendan had straightened her act up, and I think she was clean for the better part of their relationship.
Bryn and Phil married in 1987, with their first child, Sean, born 2 years later. Phil's versatility and professionalism as a performer quickly made him the solid center of the Saturday Night Live cast.
I'm a stand-in for Bill Murray. You are a stand-in for Eddie Murphy.
We call Phil the glue on Saturday Night Live because he keeps the whole show together.
When you go through read-through on Saturday Night Live, we read sometimes 45 or 50 pieces. Phil would be in, 3/4 of them.
Phil's popularity continued to rise as Bryn took on the full-time role of wife and mother, a role that made her virtually abandon any hopes of her own career.
She resented him because he was in the limelight and she wasn't.
She was a sometime actress, a sometime model, but again, no one knew anything she had done. No one knew what justified the title actress or model.
It was hard for her because every time she and Phil were together in a public situation and they would want to photograph Phil and talk to Phil, and she felt left out, very left out. She really wanted to make a mark for herself. She didn't want to be Mrs. Phil Hartman.
The birth of their second child, a daughter, only seemed to increase the strain, bringing their marital problems right to the stage of Saturday Night Live.
And I could see them from the stage doors, these two little gesticulating figures having quite an argument. He came to the makeup room, and he was shaken and very disturbed, sat down in my chair, and he, in a comic Phil Hartman voice, again, a character filter, he was trying to distance himself from whatever was bothering him. He said, "Well, Norm, it looks like the wife's taking me to divorce court." He really fell apart because he thought she was going to divorce him. During that incident that I described, he was really a mess. And that's when I realized that he really cared about staying married. I don't know if it was because of her or because of the kids or because he wanted it all to look perfect.
After 153 performances, Phil decided to leave Saturday Night Live and move the family to L.A., where he would pursue his own projects. One project in development was his own show in which Bryn would have appeared as his wife.
The deal is set, and it's going to be called The Phil Show, and we're going to try to bring sketch comedy into prime time.
But before it even got off the ground, comedians Dana Carvey, Paula Poundstone, and Martin Short's attempt at sketch comedy shows all debuted and failed. So Phil decided to join the ensemble cast of News Radio.
It's not the Phil Hartman show, it's an ensemble show, and I really feel good.
And Bryn's dream of stardom faded even further.
As soon as they moved to Los Angeles, that's when her personality started to change. And it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good change. The most beautiful, talented, gorgeous women in the world flock to Hollywood to become stars.
Oh, she had her chin done and she had her nose work done.
She's 40. She's looking at these women.
And I think she had her eyes done.
She's starting to compare herself.
I think she was always looking for something to do.
One does not need to be Sigmund Freud to understand that she was suffering from a great deal of insecurity.
There were times when she was in photographs and stuff where I didn't even recognize her.
The time Bryn spent undergoing plastic surgery alternated with time spent in other, equally private medical facilities.
When I was in rehab, I was talking with Phil, and he was telling me that Bryn was struggling. And then when I got out, Phil was asking me what it was like at that particular rehab, and I was telling him, it's nice. I think Bryn would like it.
He always took the higher road, and he always gave her ultimatums and got her into rehab. He did everything he could.
Brendan had slipped back into her old days of doing drugs and stuff, and he basically said, if you don't stop using, we're finished, and I guess she couldn't stop.
Coming up, the last night and the last wishes of Phil and Bryn Hartman. When TV Guide, the truth behind the rumors continues. There's no question that the marriage of Phil and Bryn Hartman was in trouble, but there's also no question that the unthinkable act that was about to occur was just that, unthinkable. The day before the murder-suicide, Phil, an avid sailor, had purchased a new boat. Bryn had reserved an entire day of massage and hot tub therapy for both she and Phil at a local spa. And most importantly, Bryn had attempted to book herself into a drug and alcohol rehab facility for the following weekend. But when the sun rose on May 29th, 1998, none of that would matter. The night before, Bryn and Phil had evidently had an argument. And while no one can be exactly certain what transpired, what follows is the result of police investigation and interviews.
Bryn didn't like to fight, and Phil was sort of placid.
She would leave and call a girlfriend and have a couple drinks or go for a walk or whatever to simmer down, and then he would just go to sleep.
Bryn Hartman apparently spent the better part of the evening at the Buco de Beppo restaurant. At approximately 10:15 p.m., Bryn Hartman went to the residence of one Ron Douglas.
There's been a lot of rumors that he supplied Brendan with her drugs.
The theory is that they had drugs in common, and that's not a good thing to have in common, is it?
I don't believe that Ron provided cocaine to Bryn that night. If you have a witness that says that he did, have them come forward and talk to me.
Mr. Douglas indicates via his interview that Bryn Hartman was quite intoxicated. In fact, she threw up while she was at his residence. And she spent a couple of hours there on the first visit.
She visits with Ron, and she leaves his house about 12:30 at night. My theory at that point is that when she gets home, there's some type of an argument. And I say that because Sean hears an argument. He hears his mom and his father arguing, and he hears his mom, you know, say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. He shuts his bedroom door and he goes back to sleep.
Phil, it appears, told her he was sick and tired of her substance abuse.
It was the recreational drug use and the alcohol, and Phil didn't do that. And he didn't want that kind of family life.
And the argument got very heated, but he went to bed. And they had not fully resolved the argument.
He would refuse to fight with her. And he would go to sleep or turn his back on her, not continue the argument when she wanted to continue it.
I think the argument, coupled with her diminished capacity as far as, you know, being under the influence of something, she did something that she would never do if she was sober. And that's when the tragedy occurs.
She then left the house, the children in it, went to a friend's house, Ron Douglas.
She tells him that she shot Phil, and I guess Ron does what a lot of us would do. He just, you know, you don't believe it.
Mr. Douglas finally agreed to follow Bryn Hartman to the family residence. She was apparently running through red lights and driving in excessive speeds and driving quite erratically.
He follows her into the home, still not believing that Phil had been shot.
He went into the residence, and Mr. Douglas observed Phil Hartman dead in the master bedroom.
And then he leaves the bedroom, goes to the hallway immediately, and that's when he calls the police department.
There's been a shooting at 5065 Encino Boulevard.
What's up? How many people were shot?
Just one.
Was this on purpose, or is this an accident, or what? Do you know what happened?
I have no idea. She said she had killed her husband. I didn't believe her.
At that time, they're advised by Mr. Douglas that Bryn Hartman has gone into the master bedroom.
Bryn picks up her private line in the bedroom, locks the door, and actually calls her sister. Very, very upset, obviously. And I think one of the last things that Bryn says to her sister is, take care of my children and tell them that I love them very much.
When the police officers get there initially, their first action is to begin removing the children from the residence.
They were searching for the little girl first to try to get her out because Ron told them that there's a little girl in a bedroom there. And then while they're doing that, that's when they hear the gunshot.
When the officers entered the master bedroom, they discovered Bryn Hartman, who had just shot and killed herself, and they also discovered Phil Hartman lying dead in the bed. It appeared that he had been shot multiple times, and it did not appear that there was any type of resistance put up, so it was apparent that he was shot in his sleep.
What caused an act of such violent desperation? What pushed a recurring marital argument to homicide and suicide?
I just think she just snapped.
I think Brendan was a really good person at heart. I just think that she was a lost soul.
When you're drinking or using drugs, you really can lose yourself. You really can just lose yourself. And I know that's what happened with Bryn. She lost herself because I knew the sober Bryn. She was a wonderful, warm, caring, loving mother and person.
The autopsy report showed that in addition to alcohol, Bryn's system had traces of cocaine and Zoloft, a prescription antidepressant. While considered a miracle drug by many, antidepressants have been coming under much closer scrutiny in the past few years.
We did learn that Zoloft and other antidepressant drugs have a side effect. And 3% of the people that use them have homicidal and suicidal tendencies. I mean, 97% of the time, the antidepressant drugs work fine, but there is a deadly side effect of those drugs, and that was a surprise to me.
According to Phil's last wishes, Bryn's ashes were scattered along with his over the Southern California ocean. He loved to sail. And according to the last request of Bryn Hartman, her children are being well taken care of by her sister.
I think Phil would have liked the fact that his death was the #2 story on a day that Pakistan blew up a nuclear weapon. I think that would have pleased Phil, that his tragedy was, ranked the #2 spot on all the national newscasts.
TV Guide Channel.
Up next on Fox 4 News at 9. Dallas looks to make it harder for adult-oriented businesses to stay in business. The President and the Navy honor a North Texas sailor and the others killed in the USS Cole bombing. That sailor's loved ones here in North Texas gather to honor the young man. Fashion designers have an eye for high-tech wear that's perfect for the person on the go and in the know. Plus, the pros and cons of residential